Well, everyone, in this nugget, we are going to set ourselves up for the future. What do I mean by this? I want to give you a good solid foundation in UCS Manager pools, policies, templates, and service profiles. These are the ingredients that data center administrators use in the UCS to be able to instantly, at the snap of a finger, at the click of a mouse, deploy virtualized servers in a real high availability fashion. Let's get started. Let me explain this to you. And it is definitely a preview of what you're going to get into in depth in more advanced training classes here at CBT Nuggets, like the classes that you'll find in CCNP Data Center. Now, specifically in this nugget, I want to start out with you discussing hardware abstraction. It's critical for you to understand our objective and why we want to do hardware abstraction, so these ingredients down here will actually make sense to you. We'll talk about how we're going to use resource pools in order to make this hardware abstraction simple. We'll talk to you about how we'll use profiles and templates to very quickly deploy the particular data center that our organization needs. And finally, I'll talk to you about the power of policies to literally dictate how things will operate in your data center. Look, I absolutely can't wait. We just need to jump in here. Let's go for it. Now let's talk about hardware abstraction as I promised. Let's say we've got this UCS chassis here, and on this particular blade right here, we have a virtual machine running. And that virtual machine is doing Windows Server 2012 for us in SharePoint. That's its job, and it's doing a great job. But you know what? We need to take down this blade. There is some we want to virtualize to begin with, the ability to do this. But wait a minute. When that particular server was living there, it needs a MAC address. When that server was living there, if it's connecting to the SAN, it needs worldwide names that we discussed, right? That are used in fiber channel environments. These things are traditionally burned in. These things are traditionally unflexible. Well, in our unified computing world from Cisco, we're going to virtualize this stuff. Yeah, we're going to make it so that worldwide node names and MAC addresses are not tied to the physical hardware anymore. That's what we mean by hardware abstraction. If we don't tie these names that traditionally were tied to the hardware, if we no longer do that, then we'll have the flexibility to move something like this virtual machine around and not have any issues in that particular process. You know what we call this? We call this stateless computing. And it is absolutely the rage, right? Yeah, we want all of these identities to be administratable now, right? And we want them to be controlled by us, the administrator, no longer tied to the hardware. And this is referred to, this revolution is referred to as stateless computing. It's hardware identifiers and things like firmware versions being abstracted into, in the UCS terminology, what we call a service profile. So we have these identities that were policy for things like how is the firmware going to be, what version of the firmware are we going to utilize, what are the QoS settings, and finally, this service profile can define the LAN or the SAN connectivity. What is going to be the state of the virtual network interface card? What is going to be the state of the virtual host bus adapter? All very, very powerful constructs here, powerful revolutionary methods to actually engage in server-based computing. So a demonstration is worth 1,000 words, right? Let's jump into our UCS Manager and let me show you these software constructs that are available to us to make this hardware abstraction a reality. Let's jump in to UCS Manager and see this. So here we are in the UCS Manager. And you're going to want to provision for your data center an environment where when something needs a name, it can grab it from a pool that the UCS manages. How cool! One of the names that servers need is a unique identifier, right? This is usually in the BIOS of the particular server. But no longer, we want to abstract that. So if we were to go over to the Servers tab, sure enough, one of the constructs that we have is pools. And if you go under here, under UUID suffix pools, we have a pool default that's been created. We can assign a pool of unique identifiers, universally unique identifiers for servers in our environment. So when we're implementing a new server and we want to give it a new universally unique identifier, we don't want to rely on what's in its BIOS. We want to abstract that. We want to make that a software driven and managed thing by the UCS. We can create a pool of UUIDs to do that. Look at this. We can even gather up servers into pools. Here I have a server pool called Blade Pool 2, and I can take Blade servers and I can put it in this particular pool. Now, when we want a physical hardware resource, we can have the UCS manager do that for us. We can automate that process. We can say, hey, give us a server from one of the pools that we've created of servers to help automate deployment in the data center. This is just so amazingly powerful, and I've got a big smile on my face because I'm recalling the first time I saw this. For some of you, it's the first time you're seeing it, and I remember how just absolutely blown away I was at the level of power that we are dealing with here. So as we move through the various tabs in our UCS Manager, you're going to have the ability to automate the functioning of your data center provisioning through pools. Let me show you one more example. If you go to the LAN tab, sure enough, there is a pools node in here. And what do you think would be in there? Of course, your ability to create a MAC address pool. Now, when anything needs a MAC address in the LAN environment, it can pull from a pool of MAC addresses that you have set up in this unbelievably powerful software. And by the way, some pools can be dynamically created. Yeah, for instance, server pools. You can go in and you can create a new server pool. And when you create that particular server pool, you can literally say, you know what? disk. Whoa, we're going way back in time there. So policies are going to dictate how a particular server behaves within the UCS system. And you know the construct that we use to bring it all together? It's called a service profile. Here in the Servers tab, I'll go to the Service Profile node and I'll right click and I'll say, let's create a service profile, and we profile. And it says, all right, where do you want to get universally unique identifiers from? And I say, okay, well, we've got a pool that we created for that. Okay, so I'll just grab the default pool. Notice if we had forgotten to do this, we can go ahead and create a suffix pool right from here. Then we go on to networking and we define how we are going to connect to the network. Is it going to be with virtual NICs? Is it going to be with virtual host bus adapters, right? We go in, actually that would be under the storage. So for the networking, it's LAN connectivity. For the storage, it's our SAN connectivity. Then zoning, then the server boot order. Okay, so we can pick a particular policy that will be utilized for boot order. You see what we're doing? We are taking a service policy and we're pulling together the elements of our pools and our policy into service profiles. We can even create templates of service profiles to simplify the management of those service profiles. Again, a nice foundation for advanced utilization of the UCS system that we will explore in depth in further training here at cbtnuggets.com. I hope this nugget has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.